Are you sometimes frustrated that your fingers seem to completely forget something that you practiced only yesterday and felt that you'd made real progress with? Well, it happens to me all the time, and today I'd like to share with you a strategy I've found that helps fix this. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. Hi, this is Tommy with Tommy's Piano Corner, the place for returning pianists, or indeed anybody who loves piano, to share tips and ideas of how to get the most from this great hobby. If it is your first trip here, then please do think about subscribing. Simply hit the little icon in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen now, and it's all done for you. Progress when we practice in piano can be a little fickle sometimes, don't you think? I mean, don't you find that we practice something one day and then the next day we come back and it's as if our fingers had never ever seen that piece of music before? And we'll try it, we'll fail, we'll try it again, we'll fail again, we'll try it again, and then before we know where we are, all the good work we've done the day before seems to be lost completely. However, I was really lucky and I attended a speed building masterclass with Fitch's online academy just recently, and the strategy I'd like to share with you today came to me from actually something that was discussed during that particular masterclass. If you are new to the channel, let me just take 1 minute to explain quickly Fitch's online academy. Some time ago, I bought and then reviewed a fantastic set of ebooks written by British pianist Fitch. And these ebooks are all about the art of practicing the piano. And I was so impressed with them that I later subscribed to his online academy, where you can get all of these ebooks available, plus a whole set of extra resources that are being added to all the time. And in addition to that, you get a really good discount on events that they run, such as this particular speed building masterclass. And it's the second event I've gone to with them now. Anyway, getting back to the topic of today's video. One of the things Graham discussed during this speed building masterclass was the familiar idea of starting slowly, using a metronome, and increasing the tempo gradually. Now, this is not something that I've generally found works very well for me. However, I'd always like to keep an open mind, and I continued listening anyway while this was being discussed. During his discussion on this approach, Graham mentioned something he'd read by a US pianist called Ruth Fletchers. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. And she was actually taught by Rachmaninov, of all people. And one thing that she said, that if you want the technique of gradually increasing the speed to actually work properly, you must resist the temptation to start from where you left off. You always need to go right back to the beginning, right back to the slowest tempo that you were using to practice, and again, gradually increase the speed every day. Let's say we started to practice something and we chose 50 beats per minute as our starting tempo. So during the course of our practice over a day or two, we managed to get it up to 60 by increasing it very gradually each time. What she said is that we shouldn't then the next day start from 60. We should in fact go back to 50 and use the same gradual increase in tempo to get it back to 60 again and see how that feels before deciding, will we go beyond 60? This idea then prompted me in fact to join some mental dots, as it were, and I tried to think, well, how could I apply the same kind of practice principle in the different ways that I like to practice? Because as I said, I don't often use a slow metronome gradual increases technique at all. And it reminded me of a previous video I'd done that I nicknamed 2 Steps Back. And by extending that a little, I find that applying this principle works really, really well. One way I think that pretty much every way of practicing has got in common is that we effectively take something that's too difficult for us to play, we'll simplify it to a point that we can just about manage it, and then we'll practice forward from there. So the idea of playing slowly with a metronome is a great example. If we can't play something fast, then if we slow it down enough, generally we get to a point where we are able to practice it, And that's what we do. We practice from a slower tempo and then perhaps try to build it up gradually over time. Hands separately is another example. If we can't play something with both hands together, then a straightforward way of simplifying it is to work on one hand at a time first, so that it's simple enough for us to manage. However, these two ways are pretty much just the tip of the iceberg, to be honest. And after you've read Fitch's ebook series on practicing, you'll see that there is almost a limitless way of devising ways to practice. And something I'm sure you might have noticed with my various tutorial and practice tip videos is that I like to find ways of simplifying the music that I want to play such that I'm able to practice it and then gradually increase the complexity as I build the piece up. Let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say we're working on the famous first arabesque by Debussy and we're trying to get that 3/2 polyrhythm, which a lot of us will find challenging at first. There are lots of ways of practicing this, and in the tutorial I did on this arabesque, I suggested you might use, for example, an E major scale with triplets in one hand and duplets in the other hand. Another way we might want to practice this could be to start simply and then gradually increase the complexity as we go along. If you think about it, managing a 3/2 polyrhythm, say as it appears in Schubert's Serenade, isn't that difficult, right? It's just 3 notes over 2. The problem with the arabesque is because we need to keep those 3 notes over 2 going for an awful lot longer than we do in the Serenade. Therefore, one way that we could practice this might be to start off by not playing the left hand all the way through. And I can think of perhaps four stages that we could use for this. So the first stage might look something like this. The second stage, something like this. The third stage, something like this. And then the fourth stage, something more like this. As you can see, the increase in complexity is by just adding 1 note at a time to the left hand. We practice until we feel nice and comfortable and nice and secure with it before we move on to the next. Therefore, using the idea of starting off from the beginning rather than starting off from where we left off last time, let's just say that we got to the third stage, right, of practicing this particular polyrhythm. Now, rather than the next day starting at stage 3 and practicing forward from there, we go right back to stage 1 and we remind ourselves how easy that very first simplified version is. Then we practice stage 2 for a while again reminding ourselves how easy that felt. Then we move on to stage 3, and maybe we move on to stage 4 that day, and maybe we don't. It's all about making it feel easy and comfortable. So once we get to the point where easy and comfortable, then we move forward to the next stage. Let me give you another example. Now, I don't know if you remember that a while ago I did a video on using Schubert's Impromptu in E-flat major as a way of building speed. And basically the technique I used was to break it down into, I think it was 8 different stages. And each stage is slightly more difficult to do than the previous one. Now, I'm not going to repeat everything I said in that video. I'll link it below for you and you can always watch it later if you wish. But effectively, all I was doing was taking smaller practice chunks and then using principles such as the floating fermata or rhythms to start recombining these smaller chunks into progressively longer and longer fragments that eventually got me to the finished piece. So, working on the same principle, let's say that I'd managed to practice my way up to stage 4, right? What I should do is, rather than then, when I start the next day, starting up from stage 4 again, go back to stage 1, maybe stage 2, and restart from there. Because the idea is it gives more and more security by constantly doing this. And what I found is that it definitely makes me much less tension prone when I've taken these couple of steps backwards and then re-practice from easier versions before getting to the most difficult version that I'd so far achieved. And I think for me, this is very important with this particular thing because, as I've said before, tension is perhaps my biggest issue when I start to try and play fast music. I've done a few videos and tutorials on how I think we can break things into more practicable chunks or maybe simplify things such that they become playable for us and then gradually build the complexity back as we get better at that particular piece. And I think, therefore, any time that we've used this kind of stage-by-stage strategy, this idea of going back 2, 3, 4 stages when we start to practice something the following day, rather than starting from where we left off the previous day, is a real game changer. Give it a try for yourself and let me know how you get on in the comments. If you're not already, then please do subscribe to Tommy's Piano Corner. Don't forget to click that little bell icon so you're notified of new videos as and when they're released. I do thank you very much for watching and look forward to seeing you very soon.